So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. President and Provost of UCL, I can see the bubble coming out of David's mouth over there with that stare that's had you all gripped all morning, and the bubble would say, "You must be bloody joking." But I'm afraid it's true, David, and what I'd like to do is introduce the session with a few personal stories between myself and David, because David was in fact, of course, one of the great founders of this medical school, alongside Donald Acheson and Jack Howell and Ralph Wright and Charles George. He was a very key figure, and he's one of the individuals that really guided this medical school to its current modern level of performance, and he did that, as we've heard all morning, through his own research excellence. He was, of course, also a bit of a character, and many of you, some of you in the audience will know that he was, in fact, my tutor. So I first met David as an undergraduate in 1972 in the foyer of Boulderwood at a cheese and wine party for new students to meet their tutors. So it must have been, I think, in the first term. And I remember an incredibly condescending and patronising comment that went something like, "What are you going to do, Arthur, when you grow up?" And I thought, well, this is nice, isn't it? And so I thought, well, I've got to think of a very smart answer. And I knew he was something, a professor of medicine or something like that. So I said, "I'm going to be a professor of medicine." And he looked me in the eye and he said, "Don't be so bloody stupid." He was, of course, a great tutor, and he did definitely make sure that my medical education was a huge success. I was one of the students who managed to escape his epidemiological clutches, and I next met him when I came back to Southampton as a medical registrar, just before I joined the faculty of the University of Southampton about a year later. And I was medical registrar to the professorial medical unit at the Royal South Hants Hospital, which was what we describe in the trade as an interesting job, because I had many different bosses. And of course, I was therefore able to compare and contrast their styles of practice of clinical medicine. David was what we would have described as being thorough, which is medical registrar speak for slow and laborious. In his clinical style, and I can remember him and Chris Martin and others pontificating about the epidemiological basis of every single patient that we came across, whereas I was just, as a young gastroenterologist, thinking, can you just get on with it, get the drugs into these guys and get them out of here. So David was someone to learn from at that stage as well. The next time, of course, I came across him, I was technically his boss as head of the medical school and subsequently as dean of the faculty. And for those of you who know the MRC unit well, you might think, well, surely David had an MRC boss, but it was embedded in the University of Southampton. And so I was tasked with conducting his appraisal. It was a complete card-carrying disaster from start to finish. I had, like any appraisal, I went in with a very clear plan of the questions I was going to ask, what the big issues were, what we needed to sort out. David took over the whole thing. By the end of the interview, I wrote a cheque for £200,000 for the MRC epidemiology unit, of course. So David was a great guy. He was an inspirational figure. He was a great mentor. And he was certainly a lovable rogue. So it's my very great pleasure to participate in this day that's celebrating his life and his outstanding contribution to biomedical science and, of course, to this medical school and this university. So that's by way of introduction, and it's now my pleasure, when I get my papers in the right order, to introduce Johan Eriksson, who's going to talk to us about the Helsinki birth cohort study. And you will have noticed that this session is predominantly looking at international data and international evidence to come behind the Barker hypothesis, as it were. And Johan Eriksson is director of the Helsinki Birth Cohort, and he's professor of medicine at the University of Helsinki. Johan, thank you.